My wife attended a soirée against my counsel, so I vanished from her life. Years later, she reappeared at my doorstep. Salutations to the Reddit community. Long have I been a silent observer here, but this marks my inaugural post. My name is Rick, and I'm 36 years old. Never did I envisage sharing my tale in such a manner, yet here I stand. I earnestly seek guidance on navigating this bewildering predicament because, to be candid, I'm still ensnared in disbelief. Merely a day prior, an event transpired that profoundly unsettled me. I encountered my ex-wife for the first time in years, and I was utterly bereft of an appropriate reaction. To provide context, so you might comprehend my quandary, my ex and I were married for approximately 3 years, but before that, we had been together since our high school days. We embarked on our romantic journey as mere teenagers, and everything felt idyllic back then. It's paradoxical to reminisce about how unburdened life once seemed. We even envisaged our future together as if we had it all meticulously orchestrated at the tender age of 17. Approximately 2 years after graduating high school, we resolved to formalize our union. Impetuous, perhaps, given how young we were both just 20 at the time. Yet, it felt like the most organic progression conceivable. I was profoundly enamored with Melissa. She was my first love, my initial authentic relationship, and I genuinely believe she was my soulmate. I would have traversed any obstacle for her, unhesitatingly. Back then, a life devoid of her seemed unfathomable. For a season, everything between us was sublime. We shared an unbreakable bond, aligned interests, and a mutual circle of friends from high school. Everything coalesced effortlessly. Our marriage felt impeccable. Undoubtedly, we experienced our share of ebbs and flows like any couple, but nothing ever instilled doubt about our relationship. I was convinced we were destined to be together eternally. I truly thought we possessed it all. Then, the tide began to turn when she immersed herself with a new coterie of acquaintances. It's astonishing how swiftly one's entire demeanor can shift when entangled with an unsuitable crowd. Melissa and I used to be in concord on nearly everything, but after she grew close to these new companions, I sensed her gradually drifting away from me. At first, the transformations were nuanced, and I hesitated to leap to conclusions, so I allowed things to unfold. Perhaps I was in denial or simply didn't want to accept that something was amiss. However, soon the alterations became more conspicuous. It transcended trivialities. She became more aloof, irritable, and frankly, more discourteous. It was as if she had metamorphosed into an entirely different individual. A significant shift was how she began to undermine me, both privately and in public settings. I felt as if I were perpetually treading on eggshells around her, apprehensive about saying or doing anything that might provoke her. Melissa and I had once been synchronized in nearly every aspect. We shared the same values, aspirations, and even humor. It felt like we understood each other in a way no one else could. We were partners in every sense. But all of that started to unravel after she connected with this new group. Initially, the changes were so slight that I didn't want to acknowledge them. Maybe I was in denial or perhaps just didn't want to admit that something was wrong. But deep down, I could feel a fissure forming between us. This newfound clique seemed to exert a profoundly negative influence on Melissa. They were ostentatious and extravagant, perpetually frequenting the trendiest venues and reveling as if there were no tomorrow. I couldn't help but notice that Melissa was increasingly drawn into their lifestyle. It commenced with minor changes. She'd return home late from their outings, often stumbling inebriated. She'd scarcely utter a word before retreating to bed. Whenever I voiced my concerns, she dismissed them outright. "You're being controlling," she'd retort, or "you're just paranoid." It felt like anything I said was automatically invalidated. I found myself constantly second-guessing, cautiously navigating to avoid setting her off. I endeavored to reason with her, expressing that we seemed to be drifting apart and that the transformations I was observing troubled me. But she didn't take it seriously. She'd merely laugh it off or deflect, accusing me of not understanding her or attempting to impede her from enjoying life. That was deeply hurtful because all I ever desired was her happiness, but I never imagined her joy would come at the expense of our marriage. The more she immersed herself in this newfound lifestyle, the more distant she became. It felt like the woman I married was vanishing, replaced by someone more interested in superficialities and the fleeting approval of her friends than in the life we had cultivated together. It wasn't long before the changes became glaringly obvious. It was as if she had transformed into someone unrecognizable. The woman who once was my staunchest supporter began to belittle me in ways that cut deeply. She'd make disparaging jokes at my expense during gatherings. At first, it was minor comments about how I worked too diligently or didn't know how to relax, but then it escalated. She began mocking my career, making snide remarks about how much less I earned compared to some of our acquaintances. I recall one particular dinner where she laughed and said, "Rick's job is essentially glorified manual labor." Others chuckled along, and I sat there feeling utterly humiliated. Initially, I brushed it off, not wanting to cause a scene or be perceived as overly sensitive, but it began to erode my confidence. When I finally mustered the courage to confront her about it, she just dismissed it, telling me I was being too sensitive and that it was all in jest. But it didn't feel like a joke, it felt like deliberate humiliation. What stung even more was that after expressing how I felt, she didn't stop. If anything, it intensified. She continued making those remarks in front of others, and each time, I felt more insignificant. It wasn't just public humiliation. Melissa began to undermine me in other ways, particularly concerning decision-making. She started disregarding my opinions entirely, especially regarding our finances. Bear in mind, I was the one working and providing for us. She was still in college and unemployed. Yet she'd make significant financial decisions without consulting me. She'd purchase expensive items like luxury handbags and apparel or plan excursions with her friends, and I wouldn't find out until after the fact. Once, she even took out a loan for a vacation without informing me. I attempted to approach the topic calmly, explaining that we needed to be more financially prudent and that we should make these decisions together. Her response was, "What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. I don't need permission to spend money, it's our money." It didn't matter that I was the one laboring to earn that money. She completely disregarded my concerns, making me feel like I had no say in how our finances were managed. It was as if my role in our marriage was inconsequential. I was the one holding everything together financially, but she acted like she was in control and that any input I had was irrelevant. It wasn't just about the money. She started invalidating my feelings in other areas too. I remember one argument over how we were dividing household chores. I was the primary provider, yes, but I never wanted her to feel burdened with all the housework. I loved helping around the house and thought we had a fair system. She handled most chores, about 60 to 70%, but I always did my share. Yet, during one argument, she accused me of being overly dramatic and overreacting to something insignificant. It was like she was gaslighting me emotionally, making me feel like my feelings weren't valid. This constant invalidation made me question myself. Was I being too sensitive? Was I the problem? Over time, I stopped sharing my feelings with her altogether because every time I did, she belittled them. It just wasn't worth the conflict anymore. But the worst part, the aspect that truly broke me, was how she began acting around other men at social gatherings. She'd openly flirt with them, even our mutual friends, right in front of me. This wasn't innocent banter, it was blatant, uncomfortable flirting. She'd laugh excessively at their jokes, touch them on the arm, and give them attention that made everyone uneasy. Not only did I notice, but our friends could tell something was off. I felt powerless to stop it. One night, I tried to pull her aside at a party to discuss it. I told her how much it bothered me and how disrespected I felt. Her response was, "You're being possessive and insecure. Stop being jealous for no reason." She brushed me off as if my feelings were insignificant. That was the moment I realized how far gone things were. The woman I fell in love with, who used to care about me, had disappeared, replaced by someone who didn't seem to care about my feelings at all. Every day, I was losing more of myself. I felt invisible in my own marriage, and no matter how hard I tried to fix things, it seemed she had already checked out. Another issue was how she criticized me, not just in private, but in front of my family. She'd make me look incompetent, criticizing anything I did, from my job to how I handled household matters. It was humiliating to be demeaned in front of my own family. When I tried to address it, she'd shrug it off, saying she was merely being honest. She'd also make plans without consulting me, arranging weekends or vacations with her friends, assuming I'd be okay with it. It felt like my thoughts or feelings didn't matter. If I had other plans, it didn't matter, she had already decided. To make matters worse, she started skipping her classes to socialize with her friends. I was beginning to feel like an afterthought in her life, like I wasn't a real partner anymore. It was clear I wasn't a priority. I felt irrelevant in our relationship. I tried to talk to her about it, but she dismissed my concerns as unreasonable. It was like everything I said was wrong. I was tired of feeling belittled and ignored. The breaking point was when she insisted on attending a party I explicitly asked her not to go to. I had heard alarming things about this gathering, hosted by someone notorious from our college who regularly threw wild parties. Unsettling rumors circulated about what transpired there. Friends who had attended confirmed the chaos, so when she mentioned wanting to go, I suggested we stay in and reconnect instead, but she wouldn't listen. I tried to explain why I was uncomfortable, sharing the disturbing things I'd heard. Despite my attempts to reason with her, she snapped at me, accusing me of being controlling and not trusting her. She said she wouldn't let me dictate her choices. She went to the party anyway. That was the final straw. I felt utterly disrespected and hurt. I couldn't handle it anymore. After that, I decided to disappear from her life. I know it sounds extreme, but I felt I had no other option. I packed my things, cut off all contact, and had my lawyer handle the divorce proceedings. From then on, any communication she had with me was through my attorney. I essentially vanished from her life. It wasn't that I didn't love her. I did. But I couldn't continue living in a marriage where I felt so irrelevant and disrespected. I was losing myself, and I needed to reclaim control of my life. That was years ago. I moved away, started anew, and never looked back. Well, I never looked back until my ex-wife showed up at my doorstep yesterday. I had rebuilt my life, started fresh, and eventually met someone new after a long period of being single. I didn't want to rush into another relationship or use someone as a rebound. I wanted to be okay on my own first. I went through therapy, worked on myself, and took the time to heal. After several years focusing on my well-being, I felt ready to date again. I've been with my current partner for about 6 years now. We've built a solid, amazing relationship, and I've been contemplating proposing. We have 2 wonderful children, a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, who are the absolute lights of our lives. Life has been good, better than I could have imagined after everything. So imagine my shock when, just yesterday, I was alone at home. My partner had taken the kids to visit her family for the weekend. I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, there she was, my ex-wife. She looked like she had been crying. Her eyes were red. I was stunned to see her after all these years. My mind raced, trying to make sense of why she was here. I was completely caught off guard. She asked if I was busy and if she could come in, but I refused. I told her I was occupied, partly because I wasn't ready to face her or let her into my home. It felt too intrusive, and honestly, I didn't want to dive into a conversation I wasn't prepared for. Instead, we exchanged numbers. She suggested we catch up over dinner sometime, but I didn't commit to any plans. I gave her my number out of politeness, but didn't respond to her dinner invitation. She mentioned that a mutual friend had given her my address, which is how she found me. I don't know why this friend would have done that, or if it was their place to give out my information. It all feels strange and unsettling. Now my partner is back home and has noticed I've been distracted. I haven't told them about the encounter yet. I'm still processing what happened and figuring out how to handle it. I'm unsure how to approach this situation or even begin explaining it to my partner. I want to handle it in a way that doesn't disrupt our life or cause unnecessary stress. For now, I'm sorting through my feelings and deciding on the best course of action moving forward. Part of me wants to know why she's here, and part of me is terrified of being dragged back into the mess I fought so hard to escape. Any advice would be appreciated. I'm all ears. Update. Greetings again, Reddit. I just wanted to express immense gratitude for all the feedback on my post. I honestly didn't expect it to receive so much attention, and I'm genuinely blown away by the support and encouragement. Your comments have helped me put things into perspective, and I appreciate every single one. Many of you mentioned that I should talk to my partner about what happened, and I completely agree. I've decided I need to be open with them about this situation, and I'll be discussing it tonight. I realize now that keeping it from them was a mistake, and I understand why transparency is crucial in a relationship. I haven't decided whether I'll go to dinner with my ex. I want to have a conversation with my partner first to see how they feel about it. The last thing I want is to make them uncomfortable or do something that could negatively affect our relationship. If my partner isn't okay with it, I won't go. Thank you all again for your thoughtful advice. I'm going to sit down with my partner tonight and explain everything. They might be a bit annoyed that I didn't bring this up sooner, but hopefully they'll understand that I was feeling overwhelmed and unsure how to handle it. Your support has been invaluable, and I'm grateful. Update. Greetings once more, Reddit. If you're just stumbling upon this, you can check my profile for my previous post to get the full picture. I wanted to give you all an update and say thanks once again for the thoughtful advice and support. I had a conversation with my partner last night and explained the whole situation. Thankfully, they weren't upset about me bringing it up a bit late. They were just as shocked as I was to see my ex-wife appear out of the blue. They've never met her, so this was surreal for both of us. My partner actually suggested that I go to dinner with my ex-wife, which many of you also mentioned. The general consensus was that it might provide closure and help me move forward without lingering questions. So I agreed to meet her, with my partner's blessing. Update. Greetings, Reddit. As promised, I'm back with details after meeting my ex-wife for dinner. We went out to dinner, just the two of us. I had suggested my partner come along, but they were busy, and many of you felt it might make my ex uncomfortable if she had something personal to share. During dinner, my ex-wife seemed enthusiastic. She started by apologizing profusely for how things ended between us. She admitted she had made grave mistakes and that her new friends back then had led her astray. She confessed that they weren't true friends and that she eventually cut ties with them. She mentioned struggling with substance abuse for a while, but said she's now clean. I have to give her credit. Overcoming that isn't easy. I shared my side, how I've built a happy life, moved on, and started a family. She seemed genuinely happy for me, but also a bit melancholy. Then she did something unexpected. She tried to reminisce about the good times, bringing up old memories, and even tried to touch my hand under the table. I wasn't comfortable with that and made it clear I wasn't interested in rekindling anything. When we were about to part ways, she leaned in for a hug that was more intimate than appropriate. I quickly ended the embrace and told her I'd moved on and would prefer not to hear from her again. I explained I agreed to the dinner for closure, with my partner's consent, and that I needed to move forward. Afterward, I felt a sense of relief. I went home and told my partner everything. They were supportive and glad I found closure. I'm grateful for their understanding and for all of your advice. Thank you all for helping me navigate this complex situation. I'm ready to focus entirely on my current relationship and family, cherishing what I have and not looking back.